Sierra Jackson's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood in the middle of the honeymoon suite, all silk sheets and champagne on ice, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's glittering waterline, and stared at the phone on the bed like it was a loaded gun. Through the bathroom door, she could hear the shower running. Steam crept out from underneath, curling across the hardwood floor toward her bare feet. Her wedding dress hung on the closet door, still perfect, still white, still innocent. 3 hours ago, she'd worn it down an aisle lined with 200 people who'd watched her marry the man of her dreams. Except the man in that shower wasn't him. The phone screen glowed in the dim light. She'd only glanced at it when it buzzed, just a peek, just curiosity. That's what wives did, right? Check their husbands' phones? Except the message staring back at her made her stomach drop through the floor. Body is secure. 48 hours and she signs everything, then dispose of her. Another message below it. The resemblance is perfect. No one will know he's gone. Sierra's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She grabbed the phone with trembling fingers, scrolled up. More messages, coordinates, confirmations, plans laid out in clinical detail like she was livestock being prepped for slaughter. Her eyes darted to the bathroom door. The shower was still running. She had minutes, maybe less. Her designer heels lay discarded by the bed. She'd kicked them off the moment they'd entered the suite, laughing, drunk on champagne and the impossibility of her own happiness. She snatched them up now, moving toward the door. Wait, no, think. She needed help. She needed... Her fingers fumbled with her own phone, hands shaking so violently she could barely grip it. She pulled up the keypad, started to dial. 9-1, but her thumb slipped, hit the wrong number, and in her panic she just pressed call on whatever came up in her recent calls. The phone rang once, twice. Pick up, pick up, pick up. You've reached a number that doesn't exist. Hang up. A man's voice, deep, controlled, with the faintest trace of a Korean accent. "Please," she whispered, barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "Please don't hang up. He's going to kill me. My husband, he's not my husband." A pause, long enough that she thought he'd disconnected. Then, "What's your location?" She told him, the address spilled out in a desperate rush. Another pause. "That's Ethan Cho's estate." His voice had changed now, focused. "You're the bride from today." "Yes, please. I don't know who you are, but I need..." "There's a service entrance through the kitchen, east side of the house. Get there. I'm 10 minutes out." "Who are you?" "Someone who needs to know where the real Ethan Cho is." The shower shut off. Sierra's eyes snapped to the bathroom door. She heard movement, a towel being pulled from a rack, footsteps on tile. "Move, now," the voice commanded. She moved, grabbed her clutch purse from the nightstand, her phone, and ran for the door. Her hand was on the handle when the bathroom door opened behind her. "Sierra?" She froze. That voice. It sounded like Ethan, but the inflection was wrong. The tone was off by just a fraction, like someone doing an impression who'd practiced but hadn't quite nailed it. She turned slowly. The man standing in the doorway wore Ethan's face, Ethan's body, even Ethan's slightly crooked smile. But his eyes were different, colder, more calculating. "Going somewhere?" he asked. He saw his gaze drop to the phone in her hand, then to his phone still glowing on the bed where she'd left it. His expression shifted, the smile disappeared. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." Sierra ran. 3 hours earlier. 3 hours earlier, Sierra Jackson had been the happiest woman in Seattle. The waterfront mansion gleamed in the late afternoon sun, all white columns and perfectly manicured gardens sloping down to the water's edge. 200 guests filled the chairs arranged on the lawn, their faces turned expectantly toward the arch where Ethan Cho stood waiting. Sierra's father walked her down the aisle while a string quartet played something classical and expensive, and she couldn't stop smiling because this was it. This was the moment. The tech billionaire with the kind eyes and the gentle laugh had chosen her. Out of everyone in the world, he'd chosen a museum curator from a middle-class family who still had student loans and drove a 10-year-old Honda. Ethan looked devastating in his tailored tuxedo, his dark hair swept back, his expression so tender it made her chest ache. When he took her hands, his were warm and steady, When he said his vows, his voice didn't waver once. I promise to cherish you, protect you, and never let you doubt how much you mean to me. She'd believed every word. They'd only known each other for 3 months, but when you know, you know. That's what everyone kept saying. They'd met at a charity art auction where Sierra had been providing authentication expertise for the pieces on display. Ethan had walked up to her station just as she was examining a recovered Monet, and he'd asked her 3 questions that proved he actually understood art, not just how much it cost. Then he'd bought the painting. $8 million, just like that. "Now I have an excuse to see you again," he'd said with that crooked smile. "I'll need someone to tell me where to hang it." The courtship had been intense. Dinners at restaurants she couldn't pronounce, weekend trips to Vancouver and San Francisco, long conversations about everything and nothing. Her work recovering stolen pieces, his tech company developing cybersecurity software, their shared love of old movies and good wine. 2 months in, he'd proposed on a sunset yacht cruise, and she'd said yes before he'd even finished the question. Now they were married. Legally, irrevocably, permanently married. The reception was a blur of champagne toasts and first dances, and Sierra's mother crying happy tears into her father's shoulder. The food was exquisite, the flowers were perfect, the cake was 6 tiers of vanilla and raspberry that cost more than Sierra's monthly rent. Everything was perfect. Except Ethan kept checking his phone. Not constantly, just enough that Sierra noticed. He'd slip it out of his pocket during dinner, glance at the screen, then tuck it away with a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When she asked if everything was okay, he kissed her forehead and said, "Nothing, just business, don't worry." But she did worry, especially when she saw him arguing with someone near the edge of the garden around 9:30. A woman, elegant, Korean, probably in her late 50s. They were speaking in low, urgent tones that didn't match the festive atmosphere. The woman grabbed Ethan's arm and said something that made his jaw clench. He pulled away, said something sharp in response, and the woman's face went hard before she turned and disappeared into the crowd. Sierra never got a chance to ask who she was. Ethan came back to her side, slipped his arm around her waist, and suggested they slip away to the honeymoon suite. "I want you all to myself," he murmured against her ear, and the heat in his voice made her forget about the strange woman entirely. They left around 10, waving goodbye to guests who were still dancing and drinking and celebrating. The honeymoon suite was in the east wing of the mansion, far enough from the reception that the music was just a distant throb of bass. Ethan held her hand as they walked down the corridor, but his grip was different, tighter, almost urgent. When they entered the room, he immediately pulled away and ran a hand through his hair. "I need to shower first. Long day, you understand." "Of course," Sierra said, though something in his tone made her uneasy. "Don't leave the room, please." He said it casually, but there was an edge beneath the words, a command disguised as a request. "Where would I go?" she laughed, trying to lighten the mood. He didn't answer, just grabbed his overnight bag and disappeared into the bathroom, shutting the door firmly behind him. Sierra stood there in her wedding dress, suddenly very aware of how quiet the room was. She kicked off her heels and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the water start running in the bathroom. This was normal. Wedding night jitters. Ethan was probably as nervous as she was, maybe more. Except her eyes caught on something. Ethan's watch, lying on the nightstand. He never took it off. It was a Patek Philippe that belonged to his grandfather, and he wore it on his left wrist, always. But just now, when they'd walked into the room, she'd seen it on his right wrist. She frowned. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe the champagne was making her paranoid. Then she noticed the cologne, the faint scent lingering in the air near where he'd stood. Ethan wore Tom Ford. She'd bought him a bottle for his birthday last month. This wasn't Tom Ford. This was something else, something sharper, less expensive. Sierra stood and walked to the bathroom door, put her hand against the wood. "Ethan?" she called softly. "Yeah?" His voice came through muffled by water and tile. "Nothing, just checking." She stepped back, looked around the room. His overnight bag sat open on the luggage rack, clothes visible inside. She shouldn't look. That was an invasion of privacy. Except something was wrong. She could feel it crawling up her spine like cold fingers. Sierra crossed to the bag, pushed aside a shirt, found his wallet, opened it. The driver's license showed Ethan's face, but the name read Lucas Park. Her hand started shaking. The phone on the bed buzzed, once, twice, 3 times. She turned, saw the screen light up with messages. Before she could think better of it, she grabbed it and read, "Body is secure. Went exactly as planned. 48 hours and she signs everything. Then dispose of her. The resemblance is perfect. No one will know he's gone." The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the carpet with a soft thud. Sierra's vision tunneled. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The man in the shower wasn't Ethan. The man she'd married wasn't Ethan. The man who'd said those vows and slipped that ring on her finger and promised to cherish her was... The shower shut off. Sierra's head snapped up. She heard the shower curtain slide open, heard footsteps on tile. She had seconds, maybe less. She grabbed the phone. No, wrong phone, that was his. Grabbed her phone from her clutch purse, her hand shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Bathroom, lock the door. She stumbled toward the ensuite bathroom on the other side of the room, the one for guests, and locked herself inside. Opened the window. 3 stories up. She couldn't jump, couldn't... Call 911. Call the police. Call someone. She pulled up the keypad, but her fingers wouldn't cooperate. Tried to hit 9 but slipped and hit 6 instead. The phone auto-suggested a recent number. She didn't even look, just hit call and pressed the phone to her ear. It rang. Once, twice. "You've reached a number that doesn't exist. Hang up." A man's voice, cold, controlled, with a faint Korean accent that somehow made him sound more dangerous, not less. "Please," Sierra whispered, "please don't hang up. He's going to kill me." Silence. "My husband." "He's not my husband. I don't know who he is. I don't know what's happening. Please." "What's your location?" The coldness had shifted now. There was focus there, intent. She rattled off the address, her words tumbling over each other. Another pause, longer this time. "That's Ethan Cho's estate." His tone had changed again, sharp now, alert. "You're the bride from today." Yes, I need help. I need..." "There's a service entrance through the kitchen, east side of the house. Get there. I'm 10 minutes out." "Who are you?" "Someone who needs to know where the real Ethan Cho is. Move, now." The line stayed open. She could hear him breathing, hear the sound of a car engine starting in the background. He was coming. A complete stranger was coming. Through the bathroom door, she heard the other bathroom door open, heard footsteps in the bedroom, heavy, deliberate. "Sierra." The voice was Ethan's, almost. "Where are you?" She didn't answer, barely breathed. "I saw the phone," he said, still calm, still measured. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." The door handle rattled. "Open the door, Sierra. We can talk about this." She looked at the window, too high, looked at the door, locked, but he could break it, looked at her phone where the stranger's line was still open. "East entrance, kitchen, run." The door handle rattled again, harder this time. Sierra made a choice. She unlocked the door and threw it open, surprising the man on the other side. Lucas, not Ethan, Lucas Park, whoever that was, and she ran, kicked the bedroom door open and sprinted down the hallway in her bare feet, wedding dress bunched in her fists, her heart trying to climb out of her throat. Behind her, she heard him shout, heard his footsteps pounding after her. She hit the stairs and nearly fell, caught herself on the railing, kept going. The reception was still going in the West Wing. She could hear music and laughter and people having the time of their lives while she was running for hers. She veered right instead of left, away from the party, toward the kitchen like the voice had said. The kitchen was industrial and gleaming and empty. She burst through it, sending a tray of champagne flutes clattering to the floor. Found the back door, locked, deadbolt. She fumbled with it, fingers slipping on the metal. Footsteps behind her, getting closer. The deadbolt finally gave. She yanked the door open and stumbled out into the cool Seattle night. A black SUV sat idling at the curb, engine running. The passenger door opened. "Get in," a voice called. She hesitated for half a second. This was a stranger. This could be worse. This could be... Lucas appeared in the doorway behind her. Sierra ran for the SUV and threw herself inside. The door slammed shut. The vehicle was moving before she'd even caught her breath. She turned to look at the driver. Korean man, mid-30s, expensive suit, face carved from stone. He had one hand on the wheel and the other holding a phone to his ear, speaking rapid Korean that she couldn't understand. He ended the call and looked at her in the rearview mirror. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "Tell me everything. Start with how you met Ethan Cho. And don't lie. I'll know." The penthouse was everything Sierra expected from a man who drove a $100,000 SUV and spoke like he was used to being obeyed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay, the city lights glittering against black water. The furniture was all sharp angles and expensive leather, the kind of modern minimalism that screamed money and taste in equal measure. Nothing soft, nothing warm, just cold, polished surfaces that reflected her terrified face back at her from a dozen different angles. Ji-hoon Kang poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey from a crystal decanter and didn't offer her any. He settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than her car and gestured to the sofa across from him. "Sit," he said, not unkind, but not exactly gentle either. "I'm going to ask questions. You're going to answer them. Then we'll figure out if you're part of this or just collateral damage." Sierra sat. Her wedding dress pooled around her like a white puddle, ridiculous and out of place in this stark masculine space. She was still barefoot, still shaking, still trying to process the fact that 3 hours ago she'd been married, and now she was in a stranger's penthouse being interrogated like a suspect. "Who are you?" she demanded, finding her voice somewhere beneath the fear. "Really, not just a name. Who are you to Ethan?" Ji-hoon poured himself a drink of whiskey, studying her over the rim of the glass. "Ethan's business partner, silent investor in his tech company. We've known each other for 15 years, since college." "Then where is he? If you're such good friends, why don't you know where he is?" "Because 3 hours ago he sent me a coded message." Ji-hoon pulled out his phone, swiped to a text thread and held it up for her to see. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m., right before the ceremony would have started. The message was in Korean, but Ji-hoon translated. It says, "Compromised. Trust no one. Go dark." Sierra stared at the message. "What does that mean?" "It means something went wrong, badly wrong. We established that code years ago for emergencies. If either of us sent it, the other would know to disappear, stay off grid, assume everyone was a threat." He set the phone down. "I didn't go dark. I went to his wedding instead, because I thought maybe he was being paranoid, maybe the stress of the inheritance clause was getting to him." "Inheritance clause?" "We'll get to that." Ji-hoon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on hers. "First, I need to know about you. How did you meet Ethan? And don't give me the romantic version. Give me the real one." Sierra swallowed hard. "We met at a charity art auction 3 months ago. I was working. I'm a curator at the Seattle Museum of History. I specialize in recovered stolen art pieces, authentication, provenance verification, that kind of thing." "And Ethan approached you?" "Yes, he was looking at a Monet we'd just recovered, asked me questions about how we authenticated it. Then he bought it, $8 million. Ji-hoon's expression didn't change. "Did he ask about your work specifically?" "Yes, he seemed really interested in the recovery process, how we track stolen pieces, how we verify them, where they're stored before they're returned to the rightful owners." She paused. "He asked a lot of questions about Korean pieces, pottery, scrolls, jade, stuff stolen during the war." "And you told him?" "Of course I told him. I thought he was just interested in his heritage, his family history." She heard how naive that sounded even as she said it. Ji-hoon stood, walked to his laptop on the glass desk and opened it. A few keystrokes later, he turned it toward her. A family tree filled the screen. At the bottom, Ethan Cho. These Korean pieces you're authenticating, where are they now? Museum sub-basement vault, climate-controlled, high security. Only 3 people have access, me, the director, and the head of security. And their worth? Approximately $50 million, maybe more depending on the collector. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. He clicked something on the laptop and a document appeared. This is Ethan's grandfather's will. He died 4 months ago, left Ethan a fortune, $200 million, the tech company, real estate holdings, everything. Okay, Sierra said slowly. What does that have to do with? There's a clause. Ethan only inherits if he meets 2 conditions within 6 months of his grandfather's death. 1, he recovers the family's stolen Korean pieces. 2, he's married when he does. The room tilted. Sierra gripped the arm of the sofa to steady herself. He married me to fulfill an inheritance clause? He married you because you have access to the pieces his grandfather wanted recovered. You're the key to both conditions. Ji-hoon's voice was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. You gave him access to 50 million in stolen Korean pieces, and you gave him a wife, everything he needed. I thought, Sierra's voice broke, I thought he loved me. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but that's not the question right now. Ji-hoon closed the laptop. The question is, if Ethan orchestrated this whole thing, the courtship, the proposal, the wedding, why would he send me that emergency code? Why would he miss his own wedding? Why would someone replace him with an imposter at a wedding? Sierra looked up at him. Because someone else figured out the plan, someone who wants those pieces, or the inheritance. Or both. Ji-hoon paced to the window, looked out at the city. Someone powerful enough to kidnap Ethan, skillful enough to find an imposter who could pass for him at a wedding, connected enough to pull this off without anyone noticing until you saw those texts. Who would want? Ji-hoon's phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, frowned at the screen. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Sierra said quickly. He answered it anyway, putting it on speaker. The voice that came through was distorted, mechanical, impossible to identify. Mr. Kang, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Ji-hoon's expression went flat and dangerous. Who is this? Someone who's been very patient, but my patience have limits. You have the bride, I have the groom. I propose a trade. Sierra felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. The voice continued. You have 24 hours to deliver the Korean pieces from the museum vault, all of them, authenticated and verified. In exchange, I'll return Ethan Cho alive. If you refuse, he dies. If you contact the police, he dies. If you try to find me, he dies. Do we understand each other? Ji-hoon's knuckles went white around the phone. I understand. Oh, and Mr. Kang, I know about your side business, the money laundering, the offshore accounts, the not-so-legal imports and exports. Cooperate and Ethan lives, and your secrets stay secret. Refuse, and I deliver everything to the FBI. Your choice. The line went dead. Sierra stared at Ji-hoon. His face was utterly composed, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes, something that made her remember she was in a stranger's penthouse with a man who apparently had enough illegal activity in his past to be blackmailed with it. Side business? Sierra asked quietly. Ji-hoon set the phone down with deliberate care, poured himself another whiskey, drained it in one swallow. Yes, I have a side business, and now whoever has Ethan knows about it. Ji-hoon set the whiskey glass down with a sharp clink that made Sierra flinch. I run a recovery operation, he said, his voice flat. Stolen items, black market acquisitions, high-end goods that people want returned without involving insurance companies or law enforcement. I find things, I move money, I make problems disappear. Sierra stared at him. You're a criminal. I prefer procurement specialist. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Ethan's tech company, the one that made him a billionaire, half of it was funded by money I've moved through various channels over the past decade. We're partners in everything. So, I married into a criminal enterprise. Sierra's laugh came out bitter and sharp. Perfect, just perfect. You married a man who was using you to steal $50 million worth of Korean pieces to fulfill an inheritance clause. Glass houses, Mrs. Cho. The words hit like a slap. Sierra opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. She'd been a tool, a means to an end. The romantic courtship, the proposal, the vows, all of it calculated, strategic, and she'd fallen for every second of it. Fine, we're both over our heads. What now? Ji-hoon pulled out his phone, started typing. Whoever has Ethan wants those pieces. You can access the vault, but if we just hand them over, both you and Ethan die. You because you're a loose end, Ethan because he knows too much. So we don't give them what they want? We give them exactly what they want, but first we need proof of who's behind this. He looked up from his phone. Someone at your wedding today was watching you, coordinating. We need to know who. 20 minutes later, they were reviewing security footage on Ji-hoon's laptop. The venue had cameras everywhere, insurance requirement for events with that many high-value guests. Ji-hoon had called in a favor and had the entire day's footage downloaded and sent to him, because apparently that's what criminal procurement specialists could do at 11 o'clock at night. Sierra watched herself on screen, radiant in her wedding dress, smiling at guests she'd never see again, watched the ceremony, watched the reception, watched Lucas, checking his phone over and over. There, she said, pointing. Stop. Go back. Ji-hoon rewound, paused. A man in a suit stood near the edge of the frame, partially obscured by a floral arrangement. Tall, early 40s, brown hair, nondescript features, but Sierra recognized him. That's Derek Hansen, head of security at the museum. Ji-hoon zoomed in. You invited him? No, I barely know him. We say hello in the hallways. Why would he be at my wedding? Sierra's skin prickled. Can you see who he's talking to? Ji-hoon adjusted the angle, pulled footage from a different camera. Derek Hansen was speaking to someone, a woman, elegant, Korean, late 50s. They stood close together, heads bent in conversation. The woman's hand rested on Derek's arm, familiar, intimate. Sierra had never seen her in her life. But Ji-hoon had? His face went very still, very careful. Do you know her? Sierra asked. That's Ethan Cho, Ethan's aunt, his father's sister. Why didn't I meet her at the wedding? Why wasn't she? Check the timestamp. Sierra looked. 8:59 p.m. The reception had run until almost midnight, but Christine and Derek had left over 3 hours early. She fast-forwarded the footage, watched them slip away from the party, headed towards the parking lot. The timestamp read 8:59 p.m. That's right around when Ethan would have been replaced when Lucas took his place, Ji-hoon said. Sierra's mind raced. So Christine and Derek are working together. They kidnapped Ethan, put Lucas in his place, and now they're demanding the Korean pieces in exchange for his life. Maybe, but Ji-hoon looked troubled. What problem? He pulled up something else on his laptop, a news article, 3 years old. The headline read, Seattle businesswoman Ethan Cho dies in tragic accident. Sierra read the article. Single car crash, vehicle went off a cliff on Highway 90, body recovered, positive ID through dental records, funeral held at Grace Presbyterian, survived by her nephew, Ethan Cho. I was at that funeral. I watched Ethan give the eulogy. I saw them lower the casket into the ground. Then who was that at my wedding? Either Christine faked her death 3 years ago, or someone is impersonating her, just like someone impersonated Ethan tonight. Before Sierra could respond, Ji-hoon's phone rang. He answered in Korean, listened for 30 seconds, then ended the call. His expression was grim. That was my people. They found Lucas Park, the imposter. Where is he? Dead, shot execution style in a warehouse in Tacoma. Estimated time of death, about an hour ago. Sierra's stomach dropped. Christine killed him? Someone did. Whoever hired Lucas to impersonate Ethan just erased their trail, which means they're cleaning up loose ends. You and I, we're loose ends too. We need to get those pieces, Sierra said, tonight, before whoever this is makes their next move. Jihoon was already standing, grabbing his keys. Can you get us into the museum vault? Yes, but if someone's watching, let them watch. We need to see if those pieces are even still there, or if this whole thing is already over. The museum was dark and silent when they arrived at 1:47 a.m. Jihoon had brought 2 other men, silent, efficient, wearing black and moving like shadows. Sierra used her keycard to bypass the front entrance, disabled the alarm with her code, and led them down 3 flights of stairs to the sub-basement. The vault door was heavy steel, biometric lock. Sierra pressed her thumb to the scanner. The door clicked open. Inside, temperature-controlled and lit by soft LED strips, sat the collection, rows of pedestals, each holding a piece of Korean history, pottery, scrolls, jade carvings, $50 million worth of recovered cultural heritage. Sierra walked to the nearest pedestal, a Celadon vase, 12th century, supposedly recovered from a private collection in Switzerland. She'd authenticated it herself 2 weeks ago, right before Ethan proposed. She lifted it carefully, turned it over, examined the base. Her hand started shaking. "What?" Jihoon asked. "This is wrong." "What do you mean wrong?" "This vase, I authenticated the original. This isn't it. This is a replica, an excellent one, but fake." She set it down, moved to the next piece, a jade seal, turned it over, same thing. "This is fake too." Jihoon's jaw tightened. "How many pieces are in this vault?" 37. "Check them, all of them." Sierra did. It took 20 minutes. Every single piece was a forgery, beautiful, expensive, nearly perfect forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. "Someone already stole them," she whispered. "Someone switched them out weeks ago. We've been protecting fakes this entire time." Jihoon pulled up the vault access logs on his phone, bypassing the museum's security with frightening ease. "Who's been in here besides you?" Sierra scanned the list. Her name appears regularly. She checks the pieces every few days. The director had accessed the vault once 3 weeks ago, and then "Derek Hansen," she said, "5 times in the past 2 weeks, all between 2 and 4 a.m., when you wouldn't be here to notice. He switched them. He had access. He had time. Wait, if Derek already has the real pieces, why are they demanding we hand them over?" Jihoon's eyes went cold. "Because they don't want the pieces. They want something else." "What?" "They want us to break into this vault. They want us on camera stealing $50 million worth of Korean cultural heritage. They want leverage, blackmail, a way to control both of us permanently." He grabbed her arm. "We need to leave, now." But as they turned towards the door, Jihoon's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His face went white. "What?" Sierra asked. He turned the phone towards her. A photo. Ethan, bound to a chair, very much alive but beaten. Behind him, barely visible in the shadows, stood Ethan Cho, very much not dead. The text below read, "24 hours, Mr. Kang, and don't bother looking for the real pieces. I already have them. What I need now is something much more valuable. I need you." Jihoon drove them across the city to a building Sierra would never have noticed, just another converted warehouse in Georgetown, the kind of place that looked abandoned until you got close enough to see the security cameras and reinforced steel door. He pressed a buzzer, spoke into an intercom in Korean, and the door clicked open. Inside was a laboratory that belonged in a crime procedural. Computers lined the walls, screens flickering with data. A woman in her 40s looked up from a microscope, her black hair pulled into a messy bun, glasses perched on her nose. "Alice," Jihoon said, "I need a favor." Dr. Alice Chen didn't ask questions. She just gestured them to her workstation and pulled up the wedding footage Jihoon sent to her phone. The woman with Derek Hansen filled the screen, elegant, poised, Korean, late 50s. Alice ran the image through facial recognition software, biometric analysis, gait pattern identification. The computers hummed and beeped and processed. Sierra watched numbers and graphs cascade across multiple screens. "Well," Ji-hoon asked after 5 minutes. "This is Christine Cho," Alice said flatly. "Bone structure matches dental records. Gait pattern matches surveillance footage before her death. The slight asymmetry in her left shoulder from an old skiing injury. It's there. This is her." Sierra felt the room tilt. So she faked her death? "Or came back from the dead," Alice said dryly, "but my money's on the faking." In the car, Ji-hoon pulled up the accident report from 3 years ago on his phone. Single vehicle collision on Highway 90. Christine Cho's Mercedes went through a guardrail and down a ravine. The car burned. The body was badly damaged, identified primarily through dental records provided by her personal dentist, Dr. Richard Foster. "Where's Dr. Foster now?" Sierra asked. Ji-hoon's fingers flew across his phone. "Dead, suicide, 2 years ago, jumped off the Aurora Bridge." "That's convenient." "Very." Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. "Christine stages her death. Her dentist provides fake records identifying some other body as hers. Then, 2 years later, the dentist dies before anyone can question him." "So she's been dead for 3 years? Why? What was she running from?" Ji-hoon pulled over, opened his laptop and started digging through financial records with the kind of access that confirmed everything Sierra suspected about his side business. Christine Cho's finances from before her death painted a clear picture. Gambling debts, bad investments, a luxury lifestyle funded by credit cards maxed out to their limits. She'd been hemorrhaging money for years. She was about to lose everything. Ji-hoon scrolled through bank statements. Her house was in foreclosure, her creditors threatening lawsuits, and then she dies and all of it goes away. Debts forgiven, insurance payout of $5 million goes to, he clicked deeper, a shell company in the Cayman Islands, registered under a different name, but I'd bet my life Christine has access to it. Sierra stared at the numbers. She faked her death to escape debt, but that was 3 years ago. Why come back? Ji-hoon pulled up Ethan's grandfather's will again. "Look at the inheritance clause. If Ethan doesn't fulfill both conditions, recover the pieces, and be married within 6 months of his grandfather's death, the entire fortune goes to next of kin." "Christine," Sierra breathed. "She's his father's only sibling. $200 million, the tech company, real estate holdings, everything." The pieces clicked together in Sierra's mind with sickening clarity. She waited. For 3 years she stayed dead and waited. Then Ethan's grandfather dies 4 months ago, and suddenly she has motivation to come back. Not come back, stay hidden, let Ethan try to fulfill the conditions, then sabotage him at the last second. "She planted Derek Hansen in the museum," Sierra said, her voice gaining momentum. "Waited until Ethan found the pieces, then Derek switched them with forgeries. He let Ethan court you, let him think he was using you to access the vault." Ji-hoon's expression was grim. "She orchestrated the whole thing, the engagement, the wedding. Then she replaces Ethan with Lucas right before the ceremony. Lucas marries me. He was supposed to get me to sign transfer documents, then kill me." Sierra's hands were shaking. "Kill Ethan, make it look like we both died in some tragic accident." And Christine emerges from hiding, claims she faked her death because of threats. She's the grieving aunt, the sole surviving family member. She inherits everything. "Except I found those texts and called you." And now she's improvising. Ji-hoon's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned. "That's your phone calling me. I left it at the estate." He answered anyway, put it on speaker. "Hello?" "Mr. Kang?" And I assume Sierra is listening. Hello, dear. Or should I say Mrs. Cho, though you won't be using that name much longer. Sierra's throat tightened. Where's Ethan? Alive, for now. Depends on how cooperative you two are. Christine's voice was smooth, almost pleasant, but with steel underneath. Here's what happens next. You and Mr. Kang are going to deliver those Korean pieces to me, the real ones, not the forgeries currently sitting in your museum vault. We don't have them, Sierra said, but you'll find them because Derek has them, and Derek is predictable. You have a pause, 7 hours until midnight. Find the pieces, bring them to me. I'll text the location at 11 p.m. And if we don't, Ji-hoon asked, Ethan dies. If you call the police, he dies. If you try to trick me, he dies. And Mr. Kang, if you think you can use your criminal connections to find me, remember, I have enough evidence of your procurement business to put you away for 20 years. Are we clear? The line went dead. Sierra stared at the phone. She's thought of everything. Almost everything. Ji-hoon started the car. She assumes we'll do what she wants, hand over the pieces, walk into whatever trap she set. Won't we have to? Eventually. But first we need leverage. We need to know where Derek hid $50 million worth of stolen Korean pieces. How do we find that in 7 hours? Ji-hoon pulled back on the road, heading south, with the one person who might know where Derek would hide them, someone who knows his habits, his routines, his secrets. Who? His ex-wife. She hates him, filed for divorce 6 months ago, took half of his assets and his dignity. If anyone knows where Derek keeps his dirty secrets, it's her. Ji-hoon glanced at Sierra. And lucky for us, she lives 20 minutes from here. Derek Hansen's ex-wife lived in a craftsman bungalow in Ballard with a "Beware of Dog" sign and no actual dog. She answered the door in yoga pants and a tank top, took one look at Ji-hoon's expensive suit and Sierra's wedding dress and said, "Whatever Derek did, I'm not covering for him anymore." Her name was Michelle, and she had opinions, lots of them. Most involved creative suggestions for where Derek could shove his alimony checks. But when Ji-hoon mentioned that Derek might be involved in stealing $50 million worth of Korean cultural pieces, her eyes lit up with something that looked a lot like vindictive satisfaction. "He's been weird for months," she said, pouring herself wine she didn't offer to share. "Secretive, more than usual. Got a storage unit in Tacoma. Paid cash, 6 months up front." "Do you have the address?" Ji-hoon asked. "Better. I have the unit number because I'm petty and I hired a PI during the divorce." She grabbed her phone, scrolled through photos. Unit 237, Secure Store, Tacoma. He visits every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork. Ji-hoon stood. "Thank you." "If you're going to kill him," Michelle called after them, "make it hurt." The drive to Tacoma took 30 minutes through sparse late-night traffic. Sierra watched the city lights blur past her window, trying to process everything. 3 hours ago, she'd been married. Now she was hunting stolen Korean pieces with a criminal procurement specialist to save a husband who'd been using her the entire time. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked suddenly. "You barely know me." Ji-hoon kept his eyes on the road. "Ethan is the closest thing I have to family. We've been friends since college, business partners for a decade. He trusted you enough to marry you. That's enough for me." "Even though he was using me?" "Even though." Ji-hoon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "People are complicated. Ethan's no exception. Maybe he started out using you. Maybe he fell in love along the way. Maybe both things are true at the same time." "You're very philosophical for a criminal." "I prefer procurement specialist." "Right, my mistake." The storage facility was a sprawling complex of orange metal units behind chain-link fence and too many security cameras. It was 9 p.m., 3 hours until Christine's midnight deadline. The office was closed, lights off, gate locked. Ji-hoon parked around the corner, pulled a leather case from his glove box, and selected 2 thin metal tools that Sierra recognized from approximately every heist movie she'd ever seen. "You're going to pick the lock," she said. I'm going to pick the lock. Is there anything you can't do? Play piano. I'm terrible at it. He worked the tools into the padlock with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. After you, Mrs. Cho. They found Unit 237 in the back row, far from the main road. The rolling door was secured with another padlock. Ji-hoon made equally short work of it. The door rattled up, revealing darkness inside. Ji-hoon pulled out his phone, used the flashlight. The beam swept across carefully packed wooden crates, the kind designed for transporting valuable items. Museum-quality packing, professional, expensive. Sierra approached the nearest crate, pried open the top. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper and cushioned by custom-cut foam, sat a Celadon vase, 12th century, the real one. She'd know it anywhere. "This is it," she breathed. "These are the pieces, all of them." "Start loading them into the car," Ji-hoon said. "We don't have much time." Floodlights blazed to life, blinding them both. Sierra threw up her hand to shield her eyes. When her vision cleared, she saw Derek Hansen standing 10 feet away, gun in hand. 3 men flanked him, all armed, all looking far too comfortable with the weapons they carried. "I knew you'd figure it out eventually," Derek said pleasantly. "You're smarter than Christine gave you credit for." Ji-hoon's hand moved slowly toward his jacket. Derek's gun shifted toward his chest. "Don't," Derek said. "You're fast, Mr. Kang. I've heard the stories, but you're not faster than 4 bullets. Neither is she." Ji-hoon's hand stopped. "What do you want, Derek?" "What I've always wanted. Money, lots of it." Derek smiled. "Christine offered me $5 million to steal these pieces and give you her security code, Sierra. $5 million to betray my employer and help her frame Ethan's new wife. Seemed like a good deal at the time." "At the time?" Sierra's voice shook. "But then I started thinking, these pieces are worth $50 million. Ethan's inheritance is $200 million total. Christine's plan gets her everything and leaves me with pocket change. Why settle for $5 million when I could have it all?" "You're planning to betray Christine," Ji-hoon said flatly. "Triple cross, technically. I already betrayed you," he nodded at Sierra, "then Christine. Now I'm going for the grand prize." Derek's smile widened. "I already sold the authentication papers to a private collector in Singapore. $10 million. They think they're buying the real pieces next week." "Except you don't have the pieces anymore," Ji-hoon observed. "We do." "Not for long." Derek raised the gun, aimed at Sierra's chest. "Here's how this works. You going to load those crates into my truck. Then you're going to drive away and forget this ever happened. If you don't, I shoot her, then you, then I take the pieces anyway." Sierra's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Ji-hoon, saw him calculating angles and odds and coming up empty. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered. Derek had won. The gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. Derek dropped, clutching his shoulder. His gun clattered to the concrete. His men spun toward the darkness beyond the lights, trying to find the shooter. Another shot, another. The men scattered, abandoning Derek, running for cover. A figure stepped from the shadows, gun still raised, battered face, split lip, bruised knuckles, but undisputably, impossibly, Ethan Cho. Sierra's knees nearly gave out. "Ethan?" He lowered the gun, looked at her, and despite everything, the blood, the exhaustion, and the fact that he'd clearly been through hell, he smiled. That crooked smile that had made her fall in love with him 3 months ago. "Hello, darling. Sorry I missed most of our wedding reception." Ji-hoon stared at his friend like he'd seen a ghost. "How did you escape? Christine had you in a warehouse. We saw the photo." "She made a mistake," Ethan said, walking toward them, favoring his left leg. "She gloated, told me her whole plan while she thought I was unconscious from the drugs. Except I wasn't fully under. I've built up a tolerance to sedatives over the years, paranoia mostly, but it paid off." "You faked being unconscious," Sierra said. "Waited for my moment, dislocated my thumb to slip the zip ties, took out one guard, stole his phone and car keys, tracked Derek's phone to this location." He looked down at Derek, who was groaning and bleeding on the concrete. Figured if Christine wanted these pieces, Derek would be the one who knew where they were. "We need to call an ambulance," Sierra started toward Derek. "No." Ethan's voice was sharp. No police, no hospitals. Not yet. Derek's going to live long enough to tell me everything he knows about Christine's plan. Then we're going to use these pieces, he gestured to the crates, as bait for a trap. Ji-hoon checked his watch. We have 3 hours until midnight. Christine's expecting us to deliver the pieces. What's your play? Ethan looked at the crates, then at Derek, then at Sierra. His expression was cold, strategic. The tech billionaire was gone. This was someone else, someone harder. We give Christine exactly what she wants. We show up at midnight with $50 million worth of Korean pieces. We walk right into her trap, and then, asked Sierra, and then we spring ours. They loaded the crates into Ji-hoon's SUV in tense silence, Sierra's hands shaking as she handled pieces worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Derek was zip-tied and gagged in the corner of the storage unit, conscious enough to glare but not conscious enough to cause problems. Ethan moved with efficiency despite his injuries, every motion deliberate and controlled. "We're going to give Christine exactly what she wants," Ethan said, securing the last crate. Sierra stared at him. "The pieces? After everything she's done?" "And more. We're going to give her a choice." Ethan slammed the trunk closed. "Face justice or face something worse." Ji-hoon raised an eyebrow. "What's worse than prison?" Ethan's smile was cold and didn't reach his eyes. "The Park family." Sierra had heard that name before, in the museum, in authentication reports. Korean organized crime with roots going back decades. The syndicate? "These pieces weren't just stolen during the war," Ethan said, leaning against the SUV. "My grandfather took them as collateral for a $50 million debt he owed to the Park Syndicate. Then he disappeared with them, changed his name, started over in America, built his fortune on stolen money and stolen heritage." "The Parks have been hunting these pieces for 30 years, Ji-hoon added quietly. "Your grandfather stole from very dangerous people, Ethan." "I know. My father tried to make it right, tried to negotiate, return the pieces, pay the debt." Ethan's voice went flat. "Single vehicle collision, brake failure, very convenient timing." Sierra felt ice slide down her spine. "Christine killed your father?" Christine was driving the car he was supposed to be in that day. She switched vehicles with him at the last minute, said hers was acting up and asked to borrow his. He died. She walked away without a scratch. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "The Parks were his business partners. They'll want answers about who killed their associate and why." "So you're going to give Christine," Sierra said slowly, "and the pieces." "I'm going to give Christine a choice. Face American justice for murder, fraud, and kidnapping, or face the Parks for stealing their property and killing their business partner." Ethan pushed off the SUV. "Let's see which one scares her more." Ji-hoon pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and spoke rapid Korean for 2 minutes. When he hung up, his expression was grim. Park Jae-sung will meet us at Pier 57 at midnight. He's bringing his sons." "How many sons?" asked Sierra. 3, plus approximately 20 armed men." Ji-hoon looked at Ethan. "You sure about this?" "No, but I'm out of better options." They gathered evidence at Ji-hoon's penthouse. Derek's phone, unlocked with his fingerprint while he was still unconscious, contained text threads with Christine detailing the entire plan. Security footage from the wedding showing Christine and Derek leaving together. The recorded phone call where Christine had threatened them. Ji-hoon compiled it all into a digital file and encrypted it with the kind of security that suggested he'd done sort of things before. "If anything happens to us, this automatically sends to the FBI, the Seattle PD, and 3 major news outlets." "Insurance policy," Ethan approved. Sierra watched them work with a strange detachment. 12 hours ago, she'd been getting ready for her wedding. Now she was preparing to confront a woman who'd faked her death and orchestrated multiple murders. The surrealism of it made her want to laugh or scream, maybe both. "You don't have to come," Ethan said quietly, appearing at her shoulder. "This isn't your fight." Sierra, you made it my fight when you married me, Sierra said, turning to face him. When you used me to access those pieces, when you put a target on my back by making me Mrs. Cho. I know, I'm sorry, I never meant. I'm not done. She held up a hand. You did all of that. You manipulated me, lied to me, used me as a pawn in your inheritance game, but you also just escaped captivity, tracked us down, and saved my life. So yes, I'm coming. We finish this together. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, something complicated flickering across his face. Respect, maybe? Or regret? All right then, Mrs. Cho. At 10:30, they cleaned up and changed clothes. Ji-hoon provided Sierra with jeans and a sweater from his sister's closet. Apparently, she kept clothes at his place for emergencies, which raised questions Sierra didn't have time to ask. Derek washed the blood from his face and changed to spare clothes from his emergency bag that he kept at Ji-hoon's place, because of course he had an emergency bag at his business partner's penthouse. Sierra found Ji-hoon on the balcony, smoking a cigarette and staring out at the city lights. I didn't know you smoked, Sierra said. I don't, except when I'm about to walk into a situation that might get me killed. He took a drag, exhaled slowly. You holding up? Ask me again in 2 hours. Fair enough. If this goes wrong, Sierra started, it won't. But if it does, she looked at him. Thank you for everything, for saving me, for not leaving me at that estate with Lucas. Ji-hoon stubbed out the cigarette. You're stronger than you think, Sierra. You've handled tonight better than most people would. You'll be fine. We all will. She wanted to believe him. At 11 p.m. exactly, Sierra's phone, still in Christine's possession, buzzed in Ji-hoon's pocket where he'd been monitoring it. He pulled it out, read the message aloud. Pier 57, Warehouse 3, midnight. Come alone or Ethan dies. Ethan took the phone, typed a response, and held it up for them to see before sending. We'll be there with the pieces and with some friends you'll want to meet. See you soon, Aunt Christine. He hit send. Sierra's heart hammered. She's going to know something's wrong. Good, Ethan said. Let her panic. Let her scramble. Panicked people make mistakes. He looked at his watch. We have 1 hour. Ji-hoon, what's the drive time to Pier 57? 20 minutes, give or take. Then we have 40 minutes to coordinate with the parks, make sure everyone knows their role, make sure this doesn't turn into a bloodbath. Ethan started toward the door, then paused and looked back at Sierra. Last chance to walk away. I'm not walking away, Sierra said firmly. I want to look Christine in the eye and watch her face when she realizes she lost. Ethan's smile was sharp and dangerous. That's my wife. Pier 57 at 11:45 p.m. was all shadows and rust, the kind of place where legitimate business ended and other arrangements began. The warehouse loomed against the black water of Elliott Bay, its windows dark, its loading dock illuminated by a single flickering light that cast everything in sickly yellow. Sierra could hear the water lapping against the pylons below, smell salt and diesel and something else. Fear, maybe, or just her imagination working overtime. Ji-hoon's men were already in position. She'd watched them deploy with military precision, fanning out across the pier, taking high ground, securing exits. She didn't ask how many, didn't want to know, just knew that Ji-hoon's procurement business apparently came with its own private security force. They walked toward Warehouse 3 in silence. Ethan in front, limping slightly but refusing to show weakness. Ji-hoon to his left, one hand resting casually near his jacket, where Sierra knew he kept a gun, and her, still in borrowed clothes and bare feet because she'd lost her shoes somewhere between the wedding and the storage facility, pulling a hand truck loaded with $50 million in stolen Korean heritage. Christine was waiting. She stood in the center of the warehouse floor, backlit by portable lights that made her look like something from a noir film. Elegant in black slacks and a silk blouse, her hair swept back, her posture perfect. 10 men flanked her, all armed, all watching the entrances with the kind of awareness that said they knew how to use those weapons. When she saw Ethan, her composure cracked for just a second. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly. Then she recovered, smoothing her expression back into cool amusement. "Nephew," she said, "you're supposed to be in a warehouse, restrained, helpless." "Sorry to ruin your plans, again," Ethan said. Christine's smile was razor thin. "Clever escape. I underestimated you. I won't make that mistake twice, but you're still outnumbered, 10-3, not great odds." "You want the pieces?" Ethan gestured behind him. Ji-hoon's men wheeled forward the crates, opened them, revealed the pottery and scrolls and jade pieces inside. "Here they are, $50 million, everything your father stole, everything you've been planning to take for 3 years. Christine stepped forward, examined the contents of the nearest crate with a practiced eye, lifted a celadon vase, turned it over, checked the markings. "These are real. Good. I was worried you might try to trick me with more forgeries." "We're not you," Sierra said quietly. Christine's gaze shifted to her. "Mrs. Cho, how does it feel knowing your entire marriage was a transaction, that the man you love used you like a key to a vault? How does it feel knowing you killed your own brother for money?" Sierra shot back. Christine's smile didn't waver. "Liberating, actually. Han-Woo was weak, sentimental. He would have squandered the family fortune on guilt and redemption." She gestured to her men. "Take the crates, load them into the trucks." "Not so fast," Ji-hoon said. "We had an agreement, the pieces in exchange for Ethan's life and your silence about my business. And you'll get it once my men confirm these pieces are authentic and loaded safely." Christine pulled out her phone. "But just so we're clear, if you try anything, I have enough evidence to destroy you both. Ethan's inheritance scheme, your money laundering operation, Mr. Kang, all of it goes to the FBI unless I personally stop the upload at 12:30 a.m. "Or," Ethan said, "we give the police everything we have on you, fraud, attempted murder, faking your death." Christine laughed, actually laughed. "You think I'm afraid of the police? I own half of the department. The other half won't touch me because they know what happens to people who cross me. Your father learned that lesson." "You're not scared of the police," Ethan agreed. His voice had gone very cold, very clear. "You're scared of him." He held up his phone, and on the screen, a photo of an elderly Korean man with silver hair and eyes like flint. Christine's smile vanished. "No," she breathed. "Park Jae-song, the man your father stole 30 years ago, the man whose $50 million funded your family's entire fortune, the man who's been hunting these pieces before you were born." Sierra finally understood. "Your father was Ethan's grandfather? You're part of the family that stole from the Parks?" "My grandfather," Ethan corrected, "stole these pieces as collateral for a debt he never intended to pay, then disappeared, changed his name, started over in America, built everything on blood money and stolen heritage." Christine backed up a step. "You didn't! You couldn't have!" Headlights blazed through the warehouse windows, multiple vehicles, too many to count. They poured into the parking lot like a military convoy, engines rumbling, tires crunching on gravel. Black SUVs, 6 of them. They stopped in a semicircle around the warehouse entrance, doors opening in synchronized precision. Men poured out, 20, maybe more, armed, professional, moving with the kind of coordination that said they knew how to use those weapons. And in the center, stepping from the lead vehicle with the bearing of someone who expected the world to bend to his will, was Park Jae-song. He was older than his photo suggested, 70, maybe 75, but age hadn't softened him. He walked forward with a cane he clearly didn't need, just carried because it looked impressive. His suit probably cost more than Sierra's car. His eyes swept across the warehouse, taking in every detail, every person, every threat. "Ethan Cho," he said in accented English, each word carefully pronounced. "Your grandfather was a thief and a coward, but you called me. Why?" "Because these belong to your family," Ethan said simply, "and because this woman killed my father 20 years ago." Park's gaze shifted to Christine. Recognition flickered across her face. "Han Wu's sister. Yes, I remember you. You drove the car." Christine tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Park's men grabbed her, efficient and impersonal. She struggled, screaming, "Wait! I can give you money! I can—" "You have nothing I want except answers." Park's voice cut through her protests like a blade. "Why did you kill your brother?" Christine's resistance crumbled. She sagged in the grip of Park's men, her carefully constructed composure shattering. "Because he was going to tell you where the pieces were. He wanted out. He was going to betray the family, return everything our father stole. He was weak." "So you betrayed him first," Park said quietly. "Killed him, made it look like an accident, let his son believe it was fate. He would have ruined us, everything our father built." "Your father built nothing." Park's voice was ice. "He stole, he lied, he dishonored every agreement he ever made, and you followed in his footsteps." Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Park glanced at Ethan. "You called the police." "Ji-hoon called them before we arrived," Ethan confirmed. "Christine will face justice, American justice, for fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy." Park nodded slowly. "Your debt is paid, Ethan Cho. Your grandfather's sin is forgiven. But know this, your father tried to make things right before he died. He contacted me, offered to return everything, to pay the debt with interest. He was a good man who tried to undo his father's crimes. Honor his memory." "Ethan will," quietly. Park's men released Christine, letting her crumple to the concrete. Park gestured to his people, and they began loading the crates into their vehicles with practiced efficiency. In 90 seconds, every piece was gone. The warehouse was empty, except for Christine sobbing on the floor. The police cars screamed into the parking lot just as the last SUV disappeared into the night, taillights vanishing around the corner like they'd never been there. Christine was arrested, still screaming threats and accusations and promises of revenge that nobody was listening to anymore. The police found Derek's phone with the incriminating texts, found the security footage Ji-hoon provided, found enough evidence to charge her with fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. They'd find more later, the faked death, the dental records, the insurance fraud. Sierra, Ethan, and Ji-hoon watched from the edge of the pier as Christine was loaded into a police car, her perfect composure shattered, her 3-year plan destroyed in a single night. "It's over," Ethan said quietly. Sierra looked at him, saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, saw pain in the way he held his injured shoulder, but also saw something else, something uncertain. "Is it?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer, just watched the police cars drive away, taking his aunt toward a future of prison cells and court dates and the complete destruction of everything she'd schemed for. Ji-hoon lit another cigarette. "We should go, before they start asking questions we don't want to answer." The police station at 2 a.m. was fluorescent lights and bad coffee and detectives who looked like they'd been awake for 36 hours straight. Christine sat in an interrogation room down the hall, her expensive lawyer already en route but not yet arrived. Derek was in the hospital under guard, his shoulder wound treated and his mouth already running, singing like a canary about Christine's entire operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sierra sat across from a detective named Morrison and gave him the carefully edited version of events. Yes, she'd discovered her husband was an imposter. No, she didn't know where the real Ethan had been held. Yes, she'd called Ji-hoon because she'd dialed wrong in her panic. No, she had no idea who'd shot Derek at the storage facility. Everything was technically true, just missing the parts about Korean crime syndicates and $50 million in artifacts changing hands in the middle of the night. Morrison didn't look like he believed her, but he also didn't look like he cared enough to dig deeper. Ethan Cho was the story, the woman who'd faked her death, orchestrated an elaborate inheritance scheme, and gotten caught because her nephew's bride had accidentally dialed the wrong number. It was tabloid gold. Sierra's role as the confused victim played perfectly. By dawn, Christine was formally charged with attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, and about 6 other crimes the district attorney was still tallying up. Derek turned state witness, giving them everything: the forged dental records, the warehouse where Lucas had been killed, the shell companies Christine used to hide money. Lucas's body was found exactly where Derek said it would be: single gunshot wound to the head, execution style. The artifacts were officially recovered and logged as evidence. The Parks, when contacted by investigators, politely declined to press charges and stated that the pieces had been returned to the family as a gesture of goodwill by Ethan Cho. Nobody asked how that happened. Nobody wanted to know. 3 days later, Sierra was still living in a hotel room downtown, subsisting on room service and trying to figure out what came next. She'd called in sick to the museum, changed her phone number, avoided social media where her wedding photos had gone viral alongside headlines about the imposter groom scandal. The knock on her door at 6 p.m. was soft, tentative. She knew who it was before she opened it. Ethan stood in the hallway, looking significantly better than the last time she'd seen him. The bruises had faded to yellow-green, the split lip had healed, he'd shaved and changed into jeans and a sweater that made him look less like a tech billionaire and more like a graduate student. Normal, human. "We need to talk," he said. Sierra stepped aside to let him in. "About how you manipulated me? Used me to access the artifacts, engineered our entire relationship as part of an inheritance scheme?" "Yes." He didn't flinch from it. "I owe you the complete truth. No more games." They sat opposite ends of the hotel room's couch, a careful distance between them. "I researched you 6 months ago when I realized the inheritance clause required both the artifacts and a marriage. I found out you were authenticating the exact pieces I needed, Korean heritage pieces in the museum's collection, so I engineered our meeting. The art auction. I bought that Monet specifically to get your attention, asked questions I already knew the answers to because I'd done my homework, made myself interesting, available, perfect." His voice was flat, clinical, like he was recounting someone else's crimes. Everything was calculated: the courtship, the proposal, the timeline, all of it, designed to fulfill my grandfather's clause before the 6-month deadline. Sierra's chest ached. Hearing it laid out so plainly hurt worse than she'd expected. "But somewhere between the planning and the wedding, I fell in love with you. Maybe it was the way you talked about recovering stolen pieces like you were returning lost children to their families. Maybe it was just, I don't know, you, the real you, not the key to a vault, just you." "How do I believe that?" Sierra asked quietly. "How do I trust anything you say after everything you've done?" "You probably shouldn't. I wouldn't if I were you." Ethan looked down at his hands. "The marriage. I know you married an imposter at the ceremony, but the legal papers we signed beforehand at the courthouse, that was me. That was real. Legally, we're married." Sierra had suspected as much. The paperwork had been filed 3 days before the wedding, standard practice to avoid ceremony day stress. She just hadn't realized it meant she'd legally married Ethan before Lucas ever put on a tuxedo. "I'll have my lawyer draw up annulment papers if you want them, make this whole thing go away, give you your life back." "Is that what you want?" "No." His voice was rough. "But I'll understand if it's what you need." Sierra stood, walked to the window, looked out at the Seattle skyline. I don't know what I want. I married a stranger who used me, who calculated every moment of our relationship like a business transaction. That man? I don't know him, don't trust him. I know. But that stranger also escaped captivity, tracked me down, and saved my life, risked everything to protect me even though I was just a pawn in his game. She turned to face him. So I need time to figure out who you really are, who we really are together when there's no inheritance clause driving your decisions. How much time? Maybe we start over, date properly. No more secrets, no more schemes, just two people figuring out if there's something real here. Ethan stood, hope flickering across his face. I can do that. Complete honesty, full transparency, I promise. One lie, one secret, one manipulation, and we're done. Understood? Understood. 2 days later, Ji-hoon showed up at her hotel room with coffee and bagels and an expression that suggested he had an agenda. You handled yourself well in crisis. Quick thinking, calm under pressure. Most people would have fallen apart. Thank you? I'm offering you a job, Ji-hoon said, settling into the chair by the window. My procurement operation needs someone with your expertise in art authentication, provenance verification, someone who can tell a real piece from a forgery under pressure. Sierra stared at him. You want me to help you steal things? Recover, Ji-hoon corrected. And yes, the pay is excellent. You'd be financially independent from Ethan, your own money, your own choices. Why would I want to work for a criminal? Because you're good at it, because you like the adrenaline, because sitting in a museum basement authenticating pieces for people who can't appreciate them is slowly killing your soul. He set down his coffee. Think about it. 1 week later, Sierra texted both Ethan and Ji-hoon. Coffee, 3rd and Pine, noon, both of you. They arrived separately, Ethan in a suit from a morning board meeting, Ji-hoon in his usual extensive casual wear. They sat across from her at a corner table, clearly confused about why they were both there. I've made my decisions, plural. She turned to Ji-hoon first. I'll take the job, part-time. I keep my museum position as cover, but I choose which jobs I work. If something feels wrong, I walk, no questions asked. Ji-hoon smiled, satisfied. Deal. Then to Ethan, I'm not ready to be your wife yet, but I'll be your girlfriend. We date, properly. Restaurants, movies, normal couple things. Full transparency. You tell me about your day, I tell you about mine. No secrets. Deal, Ethan said, relief flooding his face. And if you lie to me again, Sierra added, Ji-hoon has permission to shoot you. Ji-hoon laughed, gladly. Ethan looked between them. Wait, are you two working together now? Sierra and Ji-hoon exchanged a knowing look. Let's just say, Sierra said, I'm keeping my options open. 6 months had done a lot of healing. The bruises had faded, the tabloid headlines had moved on to newer scandals, and Sierra had stopped flinching every time someone called her Mrs. Cho. She and Ethan were taking it slow. Dinner dates where he told her about board meetings and she told him about authentication disputes, weekend hikes where they didn't talk about inheritance clauses or dead relatives, movie nights where they argued about whether the ending of Inception made sense. Normal couple things. Complicated by the fact that they were already legally married, but normal nonetheless. Sierra had been promoted to associate director at the museum after the previous director was quietly asked to resign for not noticing that $50 million worth of artifacts had been replaced with forgeries under his watch. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd also started working with Ji-hoon on selective recovery jobs, pieces that had been stolen and needed to be returned without involving insurance companies or international law enforcement. The pay was excellent. The work was satisfying in ways her museum job had never been. Tonight's job had been textbook, a Baroque painting stolen from an Italian family during World War II, currently hanging in a Seattle tech executive's home office. Ji-hoon's team had gone in during a charity gala, replaced it with a nearly perfect forgery, and walked out with the original tucked in a custom transport case. By morning, the painting would be on a private flight to Rome, returned to the family that had been searching for it for 80 years. Sierra stood in Ji-hoon's warehouse, carefully wrapping the frame in acid-free paper, and felt that rush of satisfaction she'd come to crave. This was different from museum work. This was personal. This mattered. "You're a natural," Ji-hoon said, appearing at her shoulder. "Ethan was right about you." "He talks about me?" "Constantly. It's annoying." But he was smiling as he said it. Sierra's phone rang as she was back in her museum office the next afternoon, reviewing authentication requests for an upcoming exhibition. Unknown number. She almost sent it to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Miss Jackson?" The voice was female, young, with a polished Korean accent. "My name is Park Min-so, Jae-sum Park's granddaughter." Sierra sat up straighter. "I know who you are. We have a situation. Pieces stolen from us. Very valuable, very dangerous in the wrong hands. My grandfather suggested I contact you and Mr. Kang. He said you could be trusted." "What kind of pieces?" "Joseon Dynasty royal seals, stolen from a museum in Seoul last month. Intelligence suggests they're currently in Seattle. We need them recovered before they're sold to the wrong buyer." Sierra grabbed a pen, started taking notes. "I'll see what I can do. Do you have any leads on who took them?" "That's the interesting part." Minso paused. "They weren't stolen in the traditional sense. They were sold by someone inside the museum, someone with ties to Seattle, someone named Diana Cho." Sierra's pen stopped moving. "Cho, as in Christine Cho?" "Her daughter. Did you know Christine had a daughter?" "No." Sierra's mind raced. "I didn't." She called an emergency meeting before she'd even hung up. Ethan's office, 30 minutes. Both of them needed to be there. Ji-hoon arrived first, looking concerned. Ethan showed up still in his suit from a board meeting, tie loosened, tension in his shoulders. "Christine has a daughter," Sierra said, without preamble. "Diana Cho, 26 years old. She's an art dealer in downtown Seattle, and according to the Parks, she just sold a set of stolen royal seals that are currently somewhere in this city." Ji-hoon already had his laptop out, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Diana Cho. Founder, gallery on First Avenue, high-end Asian art, specializing in Korean and Japanese pieces. Opened 6 months after Christine was arrested." "Christine never mentioned having a daughter," Ethan said. "Because Diana was hidden. Birth records show she was raised by her father in New York, Thomas Brennan, American art dealer, divorced from Christine when Diana was 3. Diana used his last name, Diana Brennan, until 6 months ago when she legally changed it back to Cho." "Right after her mother was arrested," Sierra repeated. "She's coming after us." "Or she's been planning this all along," Ji-hoon said grimly. "Christine might have been the public face, but what if Diana was pulling strings the whole time?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Then we need to find out what she wants and stop her before she causes the kind of damage her mother did." They decided on the direct approach. Walk into her gallery, confront her, see what she knew and what she wanted. No games, no elaborate schemes, just 3 people asking very direct questions. Diana Cho's gallery was everything Sierra expected. Minimalist white walls, subtle lighting, pieces displayed like jewels in carefully curated arrangements, Korean pottery on floating shelves, Japanese prints in museum-quality frames, and in the back, behind a locked glass case, what looked like antique metal seals. Diana appeared from a back office as they entered. She was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that came from good genes and better stylists. Mid-20s, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing. She wore a silk blouse and tailored plants that probably cost more than Sierra's monthly salary, and her smile was all surface with nothing warm underneath. "Mr. Cho," she said pleasantly, "Miss Jackson, and the infamous Mr. Kang. I've been expecting you." "You have something that belongs to the Park family," Sierra said. Diana's smile widened. I have lots of things that belong to lots of people. You'll have to be more specific. The Joseon Dynasty seals, Ji-hoon said flatly. Where are they? Safe, for now. Diana gestured to the locked case, but the seals inside looked wrong. Too new. Replicas, Sierra realized. But that's not really why you're here, is it? You want to know what I want. What do you want? Ethan asked. What's rightfully mine? The inheritance my grandfather stole, the artifacts, the fortune, everything that should have stayed in my family. Diana's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, showing something colder underneath. Did you think my mother was acting alone? This has been planned for 30 years, since before I was born. By who? Ji-hoon's voice was sharp. Diana's smile returned, mysterious and infuriating. That's what you're going to find out. Consider it a game. You have 1 week to figure out who's been pulling the strings all along. If you can't, she trailed off, gestured to the case. These seals go to the highest bidder, and I don't think the Parks will be very understanding when their family heirlooms end up in a private collection in Dubai. They left the gallery in tense silence, regrouping on the sidewalk outside. She's playing with us, Sierra said. And she's good at it, Ethan agreed. Better than Christine, smarter. We need to find out who she's working with, fast, before those seals disappear. Sierra's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Just a photo. Christine Cho in prison, orange, sitting in what looked like a visitor's room, smiling at the camera. In her hands, she held a handwritten note pressed against the glass partition. The note read, Did you really think I'd let you win? Love, the Cho family. Sierra showed them both. Ethan's jaw tightened. There are more of them. This isn't over. It was never over. We need a plan, Ji-hoon said. Sierra looked at the gallery, at Diana's silhouette visible through the window, already on the phone with someone, already moving pieces on a board they couldn't see yet. Then let's make one, Sierra said, her voice steady. I'm not running from this family anymore. We took down Christine. We can take down Diana, too. They walked away together, already strategizing, already planning. Behind them, Diana watched from her gallery window, phone to her ear, smile playing at her lips. The game was just beginning. If you enjoyed this twisted tale of wrong numbers and dangerous choices, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. Drop a comment below telling me what you'd do if you discovered your wedding night husband was an imposter. Would you run or fight back? Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.